There's a conversation that has been taking place in America for the last 30 years or so, maybe a bit more. And it's not really fair to call it a conversation. It's more like a massive social shift. And built into that shift is the conversation. And some of that conversation is explicit. But the great majority of that conversation is kind of meta. A conversation that is taking place underneath everything else that's going on. And it's a conversation focused on morality. And again, focused is probably not the right word. The better word, the more appropriate word, is probably obsessed. We, for the past 30 years, give or take, have been having a conversation on multiple levels that demonstrates an obsession with morality. And we all know what I'm talking about because we live it every day. We live in this incredible moment when we celebrate, when we uphold, when we give power and voice and attention to whomever we deem to be the most moral in the conversation. And for this reason, people who are having their moment in the spotlight right now are often activists, whistleblowers, watchdogs, and those who speak truth to power. And conversely, because humans by our nature love a narrative of hero and anti-hero, the other folks we raise up and celebrate, who we applaud and give power and voice to, are the ones who call out and reject those designated moral individuals. The ones who make a platform by saying, no, actually, you're not moral. You just think you are. It's really weird. It's really weird. We live in this really bizarre time. In some ways, it's incredible, right? Because we've reached this point in history, in human history, where the most laudable, the most respected thing to be is good. That's amazing. That's amazing. The problem, of course, is that morality is really hard to define. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can take the words of almost every single philosopher that has ever lived or has ever written a word on paper. The Greek Stoics, the rationalists, the pragmatists, the romantics, the existentialists, the hedonists, the nihilists, the cynics, the deists, the empiricists. I could go on, I won't, but I could. The point is that morality, and when I say morality, I mean morality with this big capital M. Morality is complicated. Now, hear me very clearly here. I'm not saying, nor do I believe that morality is subjective. I don't believe that. I think that there is right and wrong. But I would like to argue that it is also profoundly difficult to always know what the right and wrong is in any given situation. So, why am I saying all of this? Because we have a really powerful parashat this morning. A parashat that's all about wrestling. And I've been thinking about it all week, and I've been thinking about it this morning because in some ways, from a religious and especially from a Jewish perspective, I think we've kind of lost track of what that wrestling is all about. I think we kind of scrambled the message a little bit, the message of this whole thing, this all-encompassing thing that we call Torah. In our obsession with morality, we've come to believe that Torah is a book of morality, which in some cases it is. There are moral questions, big moral questions that are proposed throughout Torah and moral arguments made to try to answer those questions. But what Torah is, first and foremost, beyond anything else, is a book, is an understanding of being neighborly. And I don't think that's a small thing. I think that's a really powerful and important thing. Torah is about being neighborly. In fact, nothing is taught and emphasized more throughout all of Torah than loving God and loving our neighbors. And there's an important distinction between being neighborly, between neighborliness and morality. Because loving is not the same as being moral. We can make an argument that loving leads to morality, but that is an argument. And quite frankly, it is a conversation, it is an argument that the Torah itself isn't so interested in having. What the Torah is interested in more than anything else is stability. It's harmony. It's creating society and then maintaining that society. And what that requires, according to Torah, is not sanctimony. Is not celebrity status activism and moral revolutionism. What it requires, and I say this seriously, what it requires is chilling out. It requires chilling out, loving one another, and uplifting one another. That's Torah. In the most practical of terms, don't worry, I brought receipts here. In the most practical of terms, that means that the Torah asks us to look out for our neighbor's property and return it if we see it in a place where it's usually not. Devarim chapter 22, verses 1 through 3. It also asks us to share our food with one another, to borrow sugar, to lend out sugar if our neighbor comes asking. Leviticus 19:9, Exodus 12:4, and more parts of Torah that I don't even have time to list here. It asks us to not charge interest and to treat one another fairly in business. Devarim 23:19. It asks us to, I'm not making this up, I promise, it's here. It asks us to shop locally and support local businesses. Exactly right, Emma. Leviticus 25:14, Rashi's explanation on the text, and Maimonides' Mishnah Torah even goes and makes it a mitzvah to shop locally and support local businesses. And finally, the big culmination of all of this, what does the Torah ask us to do? Just do menschy things for one another. Visit each other when we're sick. Help each other out when we're in need. Serve as an intermediary when necessary to help keep peace. All of this is to say that our current obsession, the obsession of morality, and the incredible power within that obsession is not, in fact, what our moral tradition is all about. It is an aspect of Jewish life, the wrestling with those big philosophical questions. That is part of our tradition, just like Yaakov Avinu. Just like Jacob, our ancestor, wrestles with God or with the angel or with himself or with his brother, however you interpret it in our Parashat this morning. But the ikar, the essence of Jewish life and wisdom, is not about divine and righteous wrestling in order to discover capital T truth. The essence of Torah, the essence of what it means to be Jewish, is to recognize that the blessing Jacob receives is his limp. The limp given to him in that epic battle, where we read, V'yivater Yaakov levado v'yavek ish imo ad alot hashachar, that Jacob was alone and a figure wrestled with him until the break of dawn. And when this figure saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Jacob, from that point on, never walks the same again. He's given a new name, Yisrael. He's given a blessing, but he's given a limp. He has slowed down. And the blessing of Torah is the limp that slows us down, that humbles us, that forces us to recognize that before we can tackle questions of objective morality and great philosophical models of ethics, we first need to be able to simply, or maybe not so simply, be neighborly, to love one another, to build, to create, and to maintain society. If we can do that, and that's a big if we can do that, then we can go and we can learn some loftier Torah. But if we can't be neighborly, if we can't live the Torah of Yerushalayim Shalmata, the basic understanding of being good to one another, then we have no business wrestling with the Torah of Yerushalayim Shalmala, the holy questions of righteousness and justice. My friends, we're living in some weird times, some bizarre times, some amazing times in some regards, but also just some bonkers times in other regards. And while everyone is competing to be either the most moral voice or to be the paragon of taking down and rejecting that moral voice, my blessing for all of us this morning is that we remember that we as Jews are asked first and foremost to chill. To chill. To be more than anything neighborly. To care for one another. To support one another. And to support our community. And I think if we focus on that, if we spend our time and energy on that pursuit, then I think the questions of morality will answer themselves. So here's to a beautiful Shabbat together as brothers, as sisters, as family, as neighbors. May we strive to know one another, to care for one another, to look out for one another, to shop locally, and to understand that to live a life of Torah is to just be as menschy as we can possibly be. With the sound of children screaming in the background, that's a good thing. It's a good noise for us to have. And I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. May it be one of peace, of community, of togetherness. And a quick challenge to all of us is that a pursuit of being neighborly, if there's anyone in this room right now that you don't know, maybe at lunch go introduce yourself. It's one small step of getting us a little bit closer to being that idea of neighborly. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're going to continue with Musaf